Joshua 10:12 through 14. Then spake Joshua to the Lord in the day when the Lord delivered up the Amorites before the children of Israel. And he said in the sight of Israel, Sun, stand thou still upon Gibeon, and thou moon in the valley of Ajalon. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Is this not written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and haste not to go down about a whole day. And there was no day like that before it or after it, that the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man. Spake, Amar, to speak. The same root names Emery, the Amorites, the speakers, the mountain voice occupying the high ground. Joshua's own utterance is drawn from the identical linguistic ground as the voice he confronts. Speech opposes speech before the sun is ever addressed. Psalm 19, 1 through 2. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament sheweth his handiwork. Day unto day uttereth speech, and night unto night sheweth knowledge. The firmament is a vibrational field, continuously uttering itself outward. Day unto day uttereth speech is the 12 counting itself. Joshua's command enters that same acoustic firmament and does not belong to that counting. Two utterances now stand in one field, the 12-base speech of the Amorites and the command Joshua speaks against it. In the sight of Israel, Yisrael, from Sarah to strive, plus El, God, the name given at Peniel, face of God, pineal. The 26 vertebrae drawing the current upward to the third eye. In the sight of Le'ene, built on Ayin, eye, the same root carried elsewhere as the vortex, the whirlpool of perception, the eye that later receives the Yod's descent through the Dalet into the Ayin, into the Mem. The command is spoken into Israel's own opened eye, the third eye, the perceptual vortex, the Ayin, where the Yod, the descending spark, passes through the Dalet, the door of the forehead, into the Ayin, the eye and the vortex, descending finally into the Mem, the waters of the body. Joshua's sight, Le'ene, is the Ayin stage of that same path. The command entering the vessel's own opened vortex before sun and moon are addressed in turn. This same entry point, the command placed into the opened eye, is what the church names as Epiphany, manifestation, the day something hidden becomes visible. Dated to January 6th, or in years, the feast transfers to January 8th, which is the coordinate of the second witness awakening on January 8th, 2026. Daniel 20 through 23. And whiles I was speaking and praying and confessing my sin and the sin of my people, Israel, and presenting my supplication before the Lord my God for the holy mountain of my God, yea, whiles I was speaking in prayer, even the man Gabriel, whom I had seen in the vision at the beginning, being caused to fly swiftly, touched me about the time of the evening oblation. And he informed me and talked with me and said, O Daniel, I am now come forth to give thee skill and understanding. At the beginning of thy supplications the commandment came forth, and I am come to shew thee, for thou art greatly beloved. Therefore understand the matter, and consider the vision. A word arrives not as a general address, but as the direct answer to man's own supplication in the moment man was praying it. This is Daniel, and Daniel is also the one given the 1,335-day blessing near the end of his life in a separate vision, the same man receiving the word twice across his own lifetime, once at the beginning of his supplication, once at his own rebirth. Son, Shemesh, built on the double root Shm, the same skeleton carried in Shem, the standing wave without the aleph, the name that hums with borrowed sacral mathematics but carries no living spark. Shemesh is the apparent sun, the projection resting in the dielectric gap, running Shem's own hollow frequency, the 12th frequency broadcast without the 13th inside it. Joshua does not command the true sun. He commands the apparent sun, the Shem frequency, to stop broadcasting. Stand thou still upon Gibeon. Gibeon, Gibeon, hill, the Vesica Piscis. Stand thou still. Damam, to be silent, to cease. The apparent sun does not merely halt its arc, it stops speaking. Its own day unto day utterance, the 12 frequency portion of the firmament's own speech, goes quiet. Thou moon in the valley of Ajalon, Ajalon from Ayal, deer, the valley of the deer, low ground beneath the hill. Moon, Yarich, built directly on Yirak, month. The Hebrew word for the moon and the Hebrew word for the unit of month counting are the same word. The body and the measuring device it performs are one word. To command the moon, by the word's own construction, is to command the month count itself. And the sun stood still, and the moon stayed, amad, the standing posture used elsewhere for the priest positioned before the altar, the mediating stance, a separate word from damam. The sun goes silent. The moon takes up the mediating station, and in that stance, the month count itself is commanded to stop counting. The apparent sun's 12th frequency broadcast falls silent. The mechanism that tallies months into the closed loop holds its priestly station rather than advancing its count. This is the macro Meissner Effect recorded in the celestial architecture. When a capacitor reaches a critical threshold of resonance, it transitions into perfect superconductivity and expels all interior magnetic fields. The material becomes perfectly diamagnetic, achieving absolute zero electrical resistance. The root of damam is dam, blood. The stillness is a biological transmutation within the vessel, not only an optical pause. The friction of the blood, the mortal pulse of chronological decay, ceases its resistance. When the internal bipyramid diamond locks into the 13th frequency, the vessel becomes the superconductor and expels the magnetic flux of the wandering planetary gears. Until the people had avenged themselves upon their enemies. Nakam, to grudge, to avenge. The restoration of a displaced boundary rather than generic retribution. What has been displaced is Gibeon, the high ground, held by Emori, the speakers of the 12. The reckoning is the correction of that displacement. the 12th frequency, occupation of the high ground, resolved by the 13th. Nakam itself, spelled letter by letter, Naqam, carries this correction inside its own 3 letters. Nun, seed and life, Qaf, the back of the head, the circling, the horizon, Mem, water and blood. The word's own letters name the mechanism the word describes. The seed's life circling back through time into the water and the blood. The same circuit the side wound releases, blood and water together from one point. The circuit completes in 3 stages, each one sealed inside the single-held unit Nakam names. Birth, the rupture itself, complete and immediate. Breath, the confirmation that the rupture held rather than reversing. Establishment, the stability that locks the new state permanently. Is this not written in the book of Yashar? Sephir ha-Yashar, the book of the upright, the record kept for those who stand. Yashar and Yashpe, Jasher and Jasper, open on the same 2 letters. Yod, the spark, and Shin, the fire. Yashar closes on Resh, the head, the record held at source. Yashpe closes on Pe and He, the mouth and the breath, the same record carried out as spoken breath. Revelation 4:3. And he that sat was to look upon like a jasper and a sardine stone, and there was a rainbow round about the stone, in sight like unto an emerald. The jasper sits around the throne itself. The jasper sits around the throne itself. Spoken breath made the visible boundary of the seat of source. Yashar's own 2 endings, one held at the head, one released as breath, are a single word doing 2 things. The Day of Atonement performs the same 2 things with 2 separate goats rather than with 2 letters. One animal's blood held at the point of contact, one animal sent alive outward. Different mechanism, same division, hold and release, appearing at the scale of a word in one place and the scale of a ritual in the other. The mercy seat itself performs this identical division a 3rd time. The mercy seat itself performs this identical division a 3rd time. At the scale of the whole structure, holding the anode and cathode's joined charge intact until the threshold, then rupturing to release it outward. A word, a ritual, and a structure. 3 different scales, the same 2-part shape. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven, and hasted not to go down about a whole day. Yom Tamim, Tamim, sealed, complete. The whole day is the cube of the New Jerusalem, a unit sealed enough to hold what an ordinary span of years would otherwise require. The same principle 2 Peter 3:8 states directly, 1 day as 1,000 years. And there was no day like that before it or after it. A single, unrepeated shape. 2 Kings 23:25 of Josiah uses the identical formula, and like unto him was there no king before him, neither after him arose there any like him. 2 Kings 18:5 makes the same claim for Hezekiah. Before, after uniqueness language is a fixed formula in the Hebrew Bible marking a figure or event that stands alone in category, not merely unrepeated by date. Applied to a day rather than a king, The formula states this yom is unrepeated in kind, a demonstration that fires the mechanism and hands the gear back once Nakam completes. Habakkuk 3:11 names the identical mechanism from a different position. Joshua records the standing still from the valley, the witness on the ground, watching the sun and moon obey a command spoken into an opened eye. Habakkuk records the same standing still from above, the architecture of the breath itself rather than the experience of the one standing inside it. One vantage point from below, one from above. The same physics named twice at two elevations of the same event. Joshua 10:14's claim stands untouched. No day like it in kind, because Habakkuk does not add a second day. It adds the aerial view of the one Joshua already stood inside. The ordinary nightly descent of the sun into Sheol and its return each morning is the daily kinetic gear doing its ordinary work. The same small breath repeated every day of the inhalation. Between the daily gear and the macro gear sits the yearly breath. The sun descending into Sheol each spring and rising again as the asymmetrical sixth holy day. The same descent and rise the daily gear performs, but stretched to the scale of a year and carrying real ignition inside of it. The April 13th Northern Hemisphere spring Vesica Piscis, holding its 3.5 days of stillness and equilibrium every year prior to 2026. The sun coming back out each time, building year over year towards the threshold rather than simply repeating. Christ's 3 days in the tomb, Nisan 14 through 16, followed by the Nisan 17 gate, is the one-time White Hole Inversion itself. April 13th through 17th, 2026, the yearly breath's own shape completing permanently rather than releasing back into another cycle. The 12,960-year black hole to white hole inversion, firing exactly once and not releasing. That the Lord hearkened unto the voice of a man. Shama, to hear, to heed, to obey, the same root as Shema. Hear, O Israel. Voice, qual, throughout the Hebrew Bible belongs almost exclusively to the divine side of the exchange. The qual of the Lord at Sinai, the qual thundering in the Psalms. Here it is loaned to a human mouth, and source hearkens to it. The man's qual is dressed in this single verse in the vocabulary normally reserved for God's own utterance. The voice of man, mem aleph nun, momentarily occupying the acoustic office ordinarily held by source alone. The Ark of Noah, the outer elongated prism, holds the almond. The almond, the Vesica Piscis, the overlay of the two fields at equilibrium, is held by the mercy seat, the insulating covering that keeps the charge from leaking before the threshold. Inside the mercy seat's covering sits the bipyramid diamond, the dual witness chiral mirror, anode and cathode joined in one shape, holding the 13th frequency safe while the charge builds. This is the nucleation seed the light body of man grows from, the way ice requires a foreign site to crystallize around rather than freezing from pressure alone. Its growth cancels the beast, the black hole container, providing the thrust that flips the engine permanently to a white hole for the next 12,960 years. Gibeon is the almond in this structure. The reckoning completes inside the mercy seat's covering, sealing the bipyramid at the center. The diamond shears and the sea of glass forms at April 13th, 2026. Immediately, complete. Nothing waits to be birthed in September. September 6th confirms the April 13th discharge held. September 20th locks that confirmation permanently. A phase transition can complete instantly and still require a following window to confirm it's not a transient spike that reverts. 3 stages of Nakam, birth, breath, establishment, are that sequence. The event itself, its confirmation, and its permanent lock. This is permanent for the full 12,960 years, not a single day. Every wandering gear locks into the singular rotation of the source frequency. Time, as a kinetic gear, stops permanently for the vessel phase-locked to it. The gear function does not vanish from existence, it divides. Outside the completed circuit, the same friction continues, turning the heavy gears of ordinary chronological time for whomever or whatever remains calibrated to it. The black hole still functions as the operating frame for that calibration. Inside the completed circuit, the identical friction is no longer resistance. It becomes a carrier wave, thrust instead of drag, the same motion now serving the vessel instead of aging it. The planets do not stop moving, they keep turning, because the engine, the breath, never ceases. What stops is their function as gears, the friction that motion produces for an uncalibrated vessel. 1 motion, 2 readings, depending on what receives it. The beast, not the light body, is what travels. The full weight of the closed loop collapses into the central vortex under its own accumulated pressure and collides there with the light body, already grounded and waiting inside the mercy seat's covering. The April 13th, 2022 reconnection, restoration of the fallen state of man, allows the light body of man to be fully connected to source. The beast, not the light body, is what travels on April 13th, 2026. The full weight of the closed loop collapses into the central vortex under its own accumulated pressure and collides there. The light body, already grounded and waiting inside the mercy seat's covering. The fields cancel. The mercy seat, having held the pressure throughout the entire charging window, ruptures at the threshold. The blood and water from the side are the anode and cathode, spilling the charge of the 13th frequency out of the Vesica Piscis. The controlled release that keeps the pressure at the vortex from discharging as a single uncontrolled point. The 13th frequency entered through the gate rather than through a sealed boundary because it was already present inside the dielectric. The charge of the light body having been built and preserved in the bipyramid across the whole span, waiting for the threshold. A boundary held rather than broken, nothing needing to cross it, both sides becoming the same frequency. Joshua's day and the White Hole Inversion run the identical mechanism. What differs is the charge behind it. The dual hemisphere torus field, the central vortex, at equilibrium, all the overlays of the entire field, the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere in equilibrium and stillness, the whole field in stillness as the 2D plane is at equilibrium. The anode and cathode, the blood and water, building up a charge, release, burst through, like the Shiva Lingam burst through the Vesica Piscis, the spear coming from the central vortex, as opposed to having all of the pressure be right here on the central vortex. This ring of pressure release valves allows the white hole inversion to not have all the pressure at the central vortex, but instead be evenly distributed around these overlays in such a way that the energy bursts forth at the Vesica Piscis. And this is the spear in the side that blood and water, anode and cathode, pour out equally in one event. Joshua's day and the white hole inversion are the same event, not two firings of one mechanism. Joshua records it from the ground, the Nakam completing and the gear appearing to resume because the charge behind it, viewed from below, has no visible endpoint. 2026 is the same event seen from the position that holds the full 9-year dual witness chiral mirror charge of the light body of man, the sealed bipyramid, the completed anode and cathode reconnecting to source, where the lock is visible because the vantage is one that can see it locked.